Welcome to the WedPro podcast, the podcast for WedPros no matter their stage.
Hey, and welcome back to the WedPro podcast. Before we get into today's episode, can I just ask you for a really quick favour? If you've been listening recently and the podcast has made you think differently, whether that's about your business or you've had one of those slight moments where you've thought, oh, that's me, maybe while you're driving, editing, on a walk, cleaning up after everyone else, or whether you just listen in the background while you're doing a little bit of work, please could you take 2 seconds to subscribe, like the episode, or share it on your stories? It honestly helps so much. And if there's anything that, of course, you would love me to talk about or anything you're struggling with in your wedding business at the moment, do come and DM me on Instagram at wedding_business_hub. I really read them, and so much of what I talk about here comes from real conversations with wedding suppliers. The comments people make, the frustrations that they think are just them, the things that you guys tell me on calls that make me go, okay, this isn't just a you problem, this is a whole industry conversation. And that's exactly where today's episode has come from. Because today I want to talk to you about the sales gap wedding suppliers keep mistaking for a pricing problem. And I think this one might hit a nerve for a few people. Well, hopefully a good way anyway. I don't want you to feel attacked in any kind of way. We're going to bring it back round. Don't worry. We're going to give you some things that you can absolutely put into your business. But first, I have had one of those proper mum weeks this week. And I'm sure you can absolutely relate. The kind where you look at the calendar and you think, God, that surely this is a joke. Wedding season's starting to gear up. Business is busy. Things are happening and launching behind the scenes. And at the exact same time, and it rolls around every single year, without fail, school life has decided to throw everything into the final term like it is trying to finish me off. There have been, and we still have some to go, school performances, dance recitals, acting performances, forms, messages, bikeability, things to remember, and things I absolutely have not remembered until the last possible second. And my daughter is 11, so she's really in that emotional stage of just about finishing primary school and getting ready to start senior school this year, which feels massive. I swear she was only about 3 last week, coming to work in my bridal shop with me on my day off and twirling around in bridesmaid dresses while I was getting on with a little bit of admin. But you know, time definitely has moved, and it seems crazy to me that she is going to be starting secondary school. She has had all of these performances and end of school things coming up, and she's an absolute professional. She's super confident, but you can see in her kind of that mix of excitement. And although she doesn't typically get too nervous for things like this, she definitely has to feel ready. She knows what she's doing. She's practiced. She can absolutely do it from muscle memory, but there's still that little bit. And for my daughter, it came with kind of wanting her hair to be a specific way. And it's that little bit before she actually steps out where she needs to feel ready. And for her, it was the sleek back plait that she wanted yesterday. And I was watching her and doing her hair, and I was thinking, that is such a human thing, isn't it? Knowing what you're doing and then feeling confident and certain enough to do it are not the same thing. And then as well, like, it is a busy stage in our household at the moment. My son has been doing mock exams, lots and lots of self-studying, which has been really interesting to watch too, because focus absolutely does not come naturally to him. It is something he has to work to do. So there have been loads and loads of little moments where he is being a bit reflective, trying to push himself out of his comfort zone, trying to motivate himself to sit and do the work, trying not to disappear into kind of other distractions. And I'm there trying to encourage him without becoming one of those parents that suddenly becomes the head of year or the head of revision, right? It's a funny time. But honestly, this whole week has really made me think about business, because so often we know what needs to happen, right? We know the outcome we want. We know the direction that we're going in. But getting from knowing to doing, or from knowing to feeling ready, or from interested to certain, is where the real work begins. And that is exactly what happens in sales conversations as well. Because I think a lot of wedding suppliers assume that once a couple has the information, they should be able to make a decision. They inquire, you reply, you tell them about your service, you might send a brochure, you tell them the price, you explain what's included, and then you think, right, okay, they've got everything now, so if they want to book, they will. But this is not how most people make decisions, especially not wedding decisions. And it is definitely not how people make big emotional buying decisions when there is money, family pressure, fear, comparison, and the entire what if we get this wrong feeling sitting underneath it all. It's a really emotional purchase. And let's be just really honest here for a second. If you are a wedding supplier and you have ever had a lovely inquiry, replied with your prices, maybe even had a really positive conversation, and then heard absolutely nothing back, got ghosted, your brain probably went straight to one place. I'm too expensive. Or maybe it tells you they were never serious, or people don't just want to pay proper prices anymore, or everybody just wants champagne service on a lemonade budget, which, to be fair, is sometimes true. Let's not pretend that there aren't people out there wanting that full luxury experience, instant replies, unlimited support, all of the extras, and then somehow expecting it to cost a couple of £100. Those people do exist. Not every ghosted inquiry is a budget problem. Not every time that somebody says, we'll have a think and come back to you, means that you've got something wrong. Sometimes it can mean that your price wasn't right for them. Of course it does. Some people genuinely cannot afford you. Some people aren't the right fit. And some people are price shopping. Some people have sent the same message, the same generic message to 10 suppliers and just see what comes back. That is just part of business. But I think price typically gets blamed for a lot of things. There are actually sales process issues. So what I see is a lot of people tell me, and what I hear, a lot of conversations about people telling me it's my prices. And actually, when we delve into it, it's not a price problem at all. It's how their sales process has been put together. And sometimes what looks like a pricing problem is really a certainty problem for your couple. And that is a very, very different thing. Because couples do not just need to be able to afford you. They need to feel certain enough to choose you. They need to feel safe enough to move forward. They need to feel clear enough to continue the conversation with you. And of course, they need to feel like booking you is not going to become something stressful, confusing, an expensive thing in an already stressful, confusing, expensive planning process. And that's the bit I think people miss. And I was laughing to myself the other day because I asked the kids something and they did that thing where they clearly heard me, absolutely processed the question, and then carried on as if I'd spoken in a frequency that only my dog could hear, right? Completely ghosted by the children. And I thought, that's exactly what some sales follow-up feels like. You've had the conversation, you know that they have seen it, you know that they were there, you know that they were interested, they gave you all of the best vibes possible. You were already imagining yourself at their wedding. And then suddenly, nothing. And in family life, you can just stand in the doorway and say, I know you heard me, but you can't really do that with a wedding inquiry, right? Although I know some of you really wanted to. You send your information, they tell you that they love your work. Maybe they sound really excited. Maybe you have one of those calls where you come off it thinking, that is a definite yes. And then they vanish. You don't hear anything, no reply, not even a polite no. Not even we've decided to go with somebody else, or we just need to think about it. I think that's one of the parts that the wedding industry really struggles with, and suppliers really struggle with. This part where it's just silence. And that feels horrible because then you replay the whole thing, right? Did I say too much? Did I not say enough? Did I reply too slowly? Was it the price? Did they find someone cheaper? Did I come across wrong? And because there's no answer from your couple, your brain fills the gap with the harshest possible explanation. And that is just what we do. But here's the reframe. Sometimes the reason is not as simple as they didn't want it. Sometimes they were just overwhelmed. They were comparing too many options. Sometimes they were just embarrassed to say no. Sometimes they were waiting on another decision. Sometimes they liked you, but that next step just felt a little bit too big for them at that point. Sometimes they were interested, but not certain enough to continue that conversation. And uncertain people do not continue in your sales process. They pause, they delay, they avoid, they go quiet. And this is not necessarily because they are rude. It is not necessarily because they didn't have good intentions when they reached out to you. It's not even necessarily that they are not your ideal client, but it is because making a wedding decision can feel heavier than people realize. And there is some really, really interesting research around this. Couples tell us that they do want pricing clarity. And that makes sense, right? Nobody wants to get into a long conversation, back and forth, get emotionally invested, and then find out that the person they like is completely outside of their budget. It creates a really horrible moment where they either have to say, no, we can't afford you, or they just quietly disappear and hope that you get the hint. And that is one of the reasons why transparency with your pricing really, really matters. And this isn't because every single person needs to list every tiny detail on their website. That is a different conversation. But it is absolutely because uncertainty around price increases risk for your couples. And risk is really what we are talking about here. Because when a couple is choosing a wedding supplier, they are not just thinking, do I like this? They are thinking, could this go wrong? They may not say it like that, but that is absolutely fundamentally there. Will we regret this? Are there hidden costs? What exactly is included? Are they going to communicate properly? Will they make me feel stupid for asking questions? What happens if something does go wrong? Are we going to feel looked after? Is this person actually as good as they look online? And when those questions aren't answered, even quietly through the way you communicate and through your content online, that couple feels risk. And it can be micro risk and it could be bigger risk. But when that risk gets too high, the safest option can start to look like doing nothing. And that is why people delay. That is why couples compare. And that is why people can go quiet and disappear. And this is not just about weddings. Human beings are naturally wired to avoid loss. We hate the idea of making a wrong decision, especially a wrong decision where money and emotion are involved, right? So when having a wedding decision feels unclear, couples often protect themselves by not deciding at all, which is really frustrating when you are the supplier waiting for a reply. But it does make sense when you understand what is happening underneath. Okay, I want to talk to you about Charlotte and David here because they are such good examples of what happens when the problem is not the price. Hey, Charlotte. Hey, David. I'm sure I'm going to get a message from one of you to say, yes, you're talking about me on the pod. So Charlotte and David have increased their prices. And Charlotte is an amazing decor and wedding decor designer. And David is a wonderful, amazing wedding photographer. And for most sentences, for most wedding suppliers, that sentence alone, that they increased their prices, is enough to make your stomach do a tiny little backflip. And I know that Charlotte and David felt those emotions too, because raising prices brings up fear, right? You naturally think, what if nobody books? What if people think we're too expensive? What if the inquiries stop? What if we pushed it too far? But what actually happened for them was the opposite. And not only that, they started booking more at their highest package. Before, hardly anybody was choosing that top option. It existed, but it was almost sitting there like the scary expensive one. And you know what I mean, the package that is technically there, but you don't really expect people to pick it. And a lot of suppliers have one of those. You have a premium option on paper, but when you talk about it, your energy changes. Maybe you rush past that one a little bit. Maybe you over explain it. Maybe you feel like you need to justify every penny of that package. Maybe you almost apologize for it without actually saying sorry. And people feel that. Your couples feel that. They may not know exactly what they are picking up on, but they feel something. And if you are unsure about the value of your packages and prices and where you bring value, your couples become unsure of the value. If you sound nervous when you discuss pricing, they start wondering if there is something to be nervous about. And if you treat any of your packages like the one that only a mythical millionaire would ever choose, they will probably treat it like that too. And what shifted for Charlotte and David was not just price. It's the way that they lead the conversation. They now go into calls knowing exactly the packages that the couples are going to be choosing. They go onto calls expecting people to choose their new highest price. And this is not in a pushy way. It's not in an arrogant way. But this is because they absolutely understand why that package exists. They understand who it is for. They understand the value. They know how to connect that option to what the couple actually wants and what they are worried about. So it stops feeling like the expensive one and it becomes, based on what you've told us, this is the option that gives you the most support, the less stress, and the experience you're actually looking for. And that is a very, very different conversation. And this is the part that wedding suppliers are missing. And it's not because they're bad at sales. Sales is a skill. I'm not going to sit here and say that it isn't. It takes practice. It is something that can be learned. It isn't something that comes naturally to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people hear the word sales and they envisage some kind of pushy, horrible sales experience that they have felt and have endured in their life, right? And this isn't because you are bad at sales. It's not because you aren't talented. It's just because you've not been taught how to lead a sales conversation in a way that creates that certainty. You've learned how to do the work, take the photos, style the room, create the flowers, plan the day, bake the cake, write the ceremony, run the venue, whatever it is. But most people have not been taught how to help a couple feel safe enough, confident enough, and clear enough to choose them. And that absolutely is a skill. And I think one of the biggest shifts you can make is to stop seeing the sales conversation as a moment that you need to prove yourself. Because, oh my word, that is exhausting. And a lot of suppliers go into inquiries feeling like they need to perform, right? They need to kind of shake themselves off, put themselves into their alter ego and perform. They need to say the right thing. They need to send the right thing at the right moment, show enough value, not sound too much at the same time as not sounding too little, not be pushy, not seem desperate, not scare them off. And before you know it, of course that sales conversation feels tense. Of course that sales conversation is something that you feel slightly nervous about and you rush that part of the conversation. Or you say something like, I don't believe in pushy sales, so go away and think about it. And if you've got any questions, come and let me know. Or go and look at another few people, compare me to some others, and come back. They're the worst things that you can say to somebody. Because sales, when it's done well, it should just feel like guidance. It should feel like helping your couples. And it should feel like you, as the expert in what it is that you do, leading your couples and helping them with their decision. A couple has come to you with a decision to make, and your job is not to just throw information at them and hope that they work it out. Your job is to help them understand what matters, understand what all of the options mean with you, understand what that next step looks like, and why the right choice is the right choice for them. And that absolutely doesn't mean forcing things. It doesn't mean manipulating. It doesn't mean pretending everybody needs your biggest package when they don't. It just means that you stop being passive, because that is where so many inquiry processes fall down. A couple asks for information. You send over that information. Maybe you send a brochure, maybe it's beautifully designed, maybe the email is super polite, and it ends with something like, let me know if you have any questions. And I get why people say that. It feels friendly, it feels low pressure, and it feels safe. But often, let me know if you have any questions is where sales conversations go to die. Because now the couple has to do the work. They have to read it, understand it, compare it, decide what matters for them, work out whether they are confused, come back to you with a good question, and keep the conversation going themselves. And they are doing all of that whilst they're also planning the rest of their wedding, managing opinions, thinking about budgets, comparing suppliers, and probably themselves being ghosted by at least one bridesmaid or groomsman in the group chat about logistics or dresses or something. So whilst your reply might feel helpful, it's not actually creating enough movement for your couples. And that is the difference. Most suppliers, and I have looked at thousands and thousands of replies from wedding suppliers. I have audited the wedding industry multiple times. I collected data before I've done discussions at WedCon, where we've looked at that initial inquiry back. And then we also went and looked at how many people were ghosting their own inquiries as well. And what we found is most suppliers, and it is a high proportion of you, it's almost 80%, are not leading that inquiry. They are handing over information and hoping that the couple sell themselves. And that is not a sales process. That is just information delivery. And information isn't going to create a decision. Information on its own is not going to create that decision or movement. And this is where the research around ghosting and why people ghost is really useful, because ghosting is not always what you think it is. Sometimes, yes, there are people who are just rude. Let's just say it. Some people could just send a polite thanks, but no thanks, and they choose not to, right? And that is annoying. But a lot of ghosting actually comes from discomfort. People do not like to say no. They don't want to feel awkward. They don't want to have to tell you that they found somebody cheaper, or they don't want to have to admit that they're over budget, or they don't want to have to explain that they are still deciding, because all of those reasons feel slightly apologetic. They don't want to have a conversation that might make them feel uncomfortable. So they say nothing. And from their side, that silence feels easier. And from your side, that silence feels like rejection. And it is a horrible combination. Then add decision fatigue into it. I call this analysis paralysis or decision fatigue. Couples are choosing so many things, sometimes 20, 30 different suppliers, venues, photographers, florists, hair, makeup, outfits, entertainment, stationery, food, decor, ceremony, timings, accommodation, transport, guest lists, all of it. At some point, and actually many points along the way, their brain gets tired. So if your sales process adds more manual work rather than reducing it, you have a problem. Again, not because you did anything wrong on purpose, but because couples need a clear next step. They need reassurance. They need to know what is included. They need to know that there are no hidden surprises. They need a simple next step through. They need to feel that if they choose you, they are not creating more work for themselves. And if they do not feel like that, they may go quiet even if they liked you. And this is the bit that I really want wedding suppliers to understand. Ghosting is not always a sign that they hated the price. Sometimes it's just a sign that the next step just didn't feel clear, safe, or easy enough. There is also some research around the speed of response, and I know that this can feel a little uncomfortable, and I don't love this either. It's not one of my favorite things to talk about because I am absolutely anti-hustle culture. Nobody wants another reason to feel like they need to be glued to their phone. And I do not want that either as well. I'm not about to tell you to abandon your children mid-performance because an inquiry came through. Can you imagine? Mummy, did you see that? No, darling, but a lead came in and apparently I had a 5-minute window. No, that is not the point. But the research is useful because it reminds us that the moment somebody inquires is that high interest moment. That is where they are active. That's where they're looking. They're emotionally in it. They've already found you, clicked, read, and decided to reach out and take action. That moment matters. And if your response is slow, generic, or doesn't seem, you just lose some of that energy. And this isn't about you being a bad business owner at all. And it's not because you need to be available every single second of the day, but it is because that some of the systems around you are not supporting that moment. You are relying on luck. You're relying on being available. You're relying on having that kind of right headspace to put something together that feels good and moves your couples forward. You're relying on remembering what you need to remember. And during wedding season, real life, normal life, that's not always realistic. And this is why I keep coming back to having some structure around you. And that's not because that sounds interesting. I absolutely understand that it doesn't feel that new sexy thing. It doesn't feel that new exciting thing at all. It really doesn't. Nobody wakes up thinking, do you know what I'm really craving today? A better process. But the right systems and foundations protect those moments that matter. They help you respond better. They help you guide people better. And they help you follow up better. And they stop you as a business owner depending entirely on whether you happen to have energy that day. And I think that is where so many suppliers have a gap. It's not effort, it's not talent, it's not care, it's just foundations and structure. It's that way to keep the sales conversation moving without feeling that you have to invent everything from scratch every single time somebody inquires. Now, I don't want to give you a full sales framework in this episode, partly because this is a podcast episode and not a 1-hour workshop, and partly because I also don't think that what you need is just another script or copy and paste template without understanding the thinking that goes behind it. That's not the point. But I do want to leave you with a thought. Instead of asking, was I too expensive? I want you to ask, did my sales process create enough certainty? Did the couple understand the value? Did they know what was included? Did they feel safe and guided? Did they understand the difference between the options? Did your reply create a conversation or just deliver information? And did your follow-up make that next step easier? Or did it just poke them with just checking in? And I say this with absolute love. Just checking in is usually not enough. It reduces risk, but it doesn't answer the thing that they're worried about. It doesn't help them decide. It just reminds them that they haven't replied yet, which they probably already know. And sometimes those few small words, 3 sentences, 3 words, just checking in, can make the whole thing feel that slightly bit more awkward. A better sales process doesn't chase, it leads and it helps. And it comes from a genuine place of making that next step feel lighter. It makes that couple feel like, okay, this person knows what they're doing. And this is what builds confidence. And I want to go back to just talking about Charlotte and David for a second, because the reason that their story matters isn't because they only put their prices up. Please do not listen to this and think, Katie said I should whack my prices up and expect everybody to choose the top package. That is not the lesson. That is not what happened at all. The lesson is that when you understand your value and you can lead the conversation properly, price can sit in a very different place. Before, they had higher packages there, but they weren't being chosen in the way they are now. Now, they expect it. They hold it differently. They talk about it more confidently. They connect to the outcome differently. And because of that, the couple can see why it makes sense. And that is the skill. Your energy teaches people how to feel about your price. You really understanding the offer and understanding what your clients want helps them to feel clear. Your confidence allows them to borrow a little bit of that from you while they are making that decision. And I think that is really important. People do borrow confidence from you. When somebody is unsure themselves, overwhelmed, or trying to make a big decision, having somebody confident that's like, I've got this, really matters. If you are scattered, they will feel scattered. And if you're vague, they're going to feel unsure. And if you're apologetic about your prices and you and ah and you say, the price, well, we could do this, or, we could take that off, they are going to wonder why. But if you are calm and confident and clear, not pushy, just clear, they feel safer. And safety sells, especially in weddings, because people are not just buying pretty things for a day, right? They're buying trust, they're buying reassurance, and they're buying the belief that on a day that they cannot repeat, that you are the person that they can trust with your part of it. And this is exactly why I'm building WedPro Studio, because this is one of the gaps that I see all of the time. Wedding suppliers, brilliant about what they do, but they are trying to manage content, inquiries, sales conversations, client experience, follow-up, strategy, TikToks, all of the things from inside their already overloaded head. And then they blame themselves when something slips. They blame their price, they blame the algorithm, they blame the market, they blame couples. And yet, sometimes those things do play a part. But often when we look at the business, there is a gap in the process. The inquiry reply isn't strong enough. The next step isn't clear enough. The follow-up isn't doing enough. The offer is not being held with enough confidence. The couple is getting information, but they're not getting clarity or certainty. And that is exactly the kind of thing I want WedPro Studio to support. It doesn't give you generic replies that make you sound like a weird corporate chatbot. No, thank you. That's not what we're about. But these are tools that I have built specifically around how wedding businesses actually work. The long decision times, the emotional buying process, the nervous inquiries, the ghosting, the need for trust, the need to sound like a real human being, the need to sell without feeling pushy, and how to follow up in a way that feels helpful and not desperate. WedPro Studio is being built to support the practical moving parts of your business: content, inquiries, sales, client experience, follow-up. All of the things that help you stop knowing what you should do and actually help you start applying it. And I'm going to be opening this soon to the Founding 100. And this is a select group of wedding suppliers who get to come in early, use it, help shape it, and share what it is really like running a wedding business right now. Because I don't want to build this behind the scenes. I've got nearly 20 years of experience building and growing businesses. I have spent nearly a decade coaching wedding suppliers in the industry. I see patterns every single day and in every conversation I have with wedding suppliers. And I really want real wedding suppliers in there, using it, feeding back, telling me what's helpful, telling me what's missing, what would make their life easier, and what would actually help them to grow. So if you want to hear more before anybody else and have the chance to come and be one of the Founding 100, go to Founding 100. That's Founding, FOUNDING 100.wedprostudio.com. Pop your name down there. I'll pop the link in the show notes. And I mean this genuinely. If you are still listening at this point in the episode, you are probably exactly the kind of person I want in there, because you're not here for just some quick tips. You are thinking about your business properly. You are willing to look at gaps. You want to understand why something's happening. You don't just want a quick fix over it. And that is who this is for. Everything is built with strategy included. Okay, before we wrap this up, I want you to sit with this question. Before you decide whether your prices are the problem, ask yourself, did my sales process create enough certainty for that couple to feel safe saying yes? I don't want you to think about if you sent enough information. I want you to just think, did you create certainty? Did you reduce risk? Did you help them feel understood? Or did you just hand it over information and hope that they sold themselves? And that is the shift of today's episode. Once you see that, I think you will start looking at ghosting completely differently. You're going to start looking at price objections differently. You're going to start looking at follow-up much differently and much more positively. And hopefully you start realizing that maybe you're not too expensive. Maybe it's the way that you're currently selling is just not fully supporting that value of what it is that you do. And that is an absolutely fixable gap. Okay, if this episode has stopped and made you think, please do take 2 seconds to subscribe. Like this episode, share it on your stories, or send it to a wedding supplier that you know. And if you do have a question or there is something that you want me to talk about, come and DM me at wedding_business_hub. If you want to be part of the Founding 100 for WedPro Studio, go to founding100.wedprostudio.com. Get your name on that list and you will hear more about this before anyone else. Next week, I think we're going to keep going with this and talk a little bit more about follow-up, because if inquiry replies are where the conversation starts, follow-up is when the booking is either saved or lost. And I want to talk about that little phrase, just checking in, and why it's not enough, why silence does not always mean no, and why a good follow-up should feel like leadership and not chasing. I'll see you then. Bye.